going to get started, and where going to start actually is with a video. We're going to be showing just a few videos, and the purpose of those videos is to kind of set the stage. So I'm going to get started here with the first one here, just as some other people might start to join.
We're at this huge turning point in the auto industry right now. It's not really about just adding more AI tools anymore. It's about a massive shift toward building organizations that are truly intelligent. And this is so much more than a tech upgrade. It's a completely new way of thinking. So today, let's unpack what that really means.
And this quote, wow, it just nails it, right? The biggest, most expensive mistake we're making with AI, it isn't about the tech, it's conceptual. We're not just picking the wrong software, we're actually failing to even imagine what's really possible here.
Okay, so let's get into it. To really understand where we need to go, we have to be honest about where we are right now. So what does doing AI actually look like for most of us in the auto industry today?
I mean, does this list look familiar? I bet it does. This is basically the AI playbook for almost everyone right now. You've got teams using ChatGPT, you turn on the new AI features in your CRM, marketing gets some cool machine learning tools, and all of these are good things. They're useful. They create little pockets of value and they make specific departments better.
But, and this is the critical turn, while every single one of those steps feels like a win, when you add them all up, they're creating this huge hidden problem underneath the surface. It's like we're fine-tuning each part of the engine, but forgetting they all have to work together. And what that creates is this massive organizational bottleneck.
But here's the real question, the one that matters. Does all of that activity actually add up to an intelligent organization? Does it build a system that can learn and adapt on its own? Well, the tough answer is nope, not really. And this is where we start to see a hidden and very expensive cost emerge. And that brings us right to the core issue, the problem with being totally focused on tools. When we think of AI as just a collection of faster, smarter gadgets, we're literally walking ourselves into a strategic dead end. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Okay, look at this. It's such a stark contrast. On the left, you have organization A. They're doing all the right things, right? They're buying all the tools, but the key is that the intelligence, the smarts, it all stays trapped inside each separate tool. The sales tool doesn't really learn from the service tool. And all of this leads to this really powerful idea called coordination debt. Just think of it like the tax you have to pay because all your smart systems don't talk to each other. It's all the extra meetings, the spreadsheets, the manual work your people have to do just to stitch together the insights from all your disconnected, intelligent tools. It's exhausting. And here's the real kicker. It's so counterintuitive. Buying that next amazing AI tool doesn't solve this problem. It actually makes it worse. Every new tool you add just creates another silo of intelligence that your team has to manually connect back to everything else, which just adds to that mountain of coordination debt. So, how do we get out of this trap? Well, it takes a massive shift in our thinking. We have to stop thinking about tools and start thinking about architecture. Let's look at a tale of two organizations to see what I mean. This slide just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you've got the organization that's just collecting tools. It gets more efficient, sure, and that's not bad. But on the other side, you have an organization that's building an intelligence architecture. Here, the intelligence doesn't just live in the software, it becomes part of the company's DNA. It's not about doing the same things faster, it's about doing fundamentally different things. And really, it all boils down to the questions we're asking. Tool thinkers are always asking, which AI tools should we buy? But architectural thinkers are asking, what capabilities do we need to build? One sees a short-term tech project, the other sees a long-term strategy for creating a competitive advantage that just gets stronger and stronger over time. So, okay, if more tools aren't the answer, then what is? Well, it means we need a whole new foundation. We have to shift our thinking from implementation to architecture. Now let's be super clear about what we mean by an intelligence architecture. This is not a list of software you need to buy. It's not your IT stack. Think of it as a strategic blueprint. It's the plan for how your organization is going to generate insights, how it's going to share them, and how it's going to govern them. The absolute key here is that the architecture, the design, comes first. Then you pick the tools that fit into your design, not the other way around. Okay, so how do we actually do this? How do we make the jump from just using AI tools to truly being an intelligent organization? Let's take a look at the path to get there. Frameworks like this pyramid are a really great way to visualize the journey.
You see, everyone starts at the bottom, with some basic awareness. Then they move up and they get functional intelligence. You got a smart marketing team, a smart logistics team. But the real magic, the transformation that gives you that compounding advantage, that happens when you cross into the upper levels, when you get to connected and eventually agentic intelligence. So this leap right here, the architectural crossing between stage 3 and stage 4, this is everything. This is the difference between having a smart sales team and a smart service team and being a smart organization. This is the moment AI stops being a tool your teams use and starts becoming the foundation your enterprise is built on. You see, sticking with just functional intelligence will eventually hit a ceiling. But achieving connected intelligence, that's where you get true compounding growth.
The thing is, most of the industry is kind of stuck in the bottom half of this pyramid. We're using AI for basic things, maybe we're even making one or two departments a little more efficient. But then we hit a wall, a coordination ceiling. And this is the exact point where our tool-based approach just falls apart. To break through that ceiling, we need a whole new way of thinking. So, how do we actually start that climb? The way forward is all about changing the questions we ask ourselves as leaders. It's way less about the tech and a whole lot more about organizational design. Look at these mindset shifts. We have to stop asking which AI tools should we buy and start asking what intelligence capabilities do we need to build. We have to stop obsessing over the short-term ROI of one tool and start thinking about how intelligence creates these compounding advantages that are almost impossible for competitors to copy. For example, instead of just a tool that predicts a customer might leave, you build a system that learns from every single interaction, sales, service, marketing, all of it, to proactively make their entire experience better. That's not a feature in a tool. That's an organizational reflex. And that is the shift we're talking about. When you boil it all down, this whole conversation comes down to a single, really profound strategic choice. And it's a choice that every single leader in this industry is facing right now, whether they realize it or not. And this is it. This is the whole ballgame. This is the question that should be on everyone's mind. We are way past the point of just deploying technology. With every single AI decision we make, we are actively, whether we mean to or not, designing the future version of our companies. The choice isn't about tools anymore. It's about intent. So what kind of organization are you building?
Okay, so we're going to do a much deeper dive into all of this. And right out of the gate, one of the things that I want to say is tools are going to be important and they're part of the architecture. So by no means are we saying not to use the tools. What we are saying, though, is there's a difference between what is a leftover from the digital era. When you think about how are we successful as an industry in the digital era, it was what's the right software system? What's the right SaaS tool? How am I going to implement it? What's the ROI? And there you go. AI does operate differently. It's not like SaaS. And so we have this remnant of, well, this is how I need to evaluate in this post AI era how these systems should work. And there's some fundamental issues as to why that's not only wrong, but it can be ultimately detrimental in the long run. And so I'm going to share, just so I can go through a bit of that chart, and we're going to do a much more quick deep dive. If you take a look, realistically, AI's been around for 70 years. You go back to Turing in the 1950s, and you think about all of the changes from the 1950s to today that have fundamentally restructured, quite frankly, the entire automotive industry. Because prior to the 50s, the last major restructure was Ford, and you had the industrial era, and that took over. People were building cars using artisans largely for the most part. And then suddenly Ford says, I'm going to put together this process of manufacturing that's going to change everything entirely. But when you think about what that required, it required you needed to train people, you needed to have systems, you needed to set up the lines. There was a lot of things that had to go into making that work before you could benefit from that manufacturing era. Then the next major change was computers. You think about how dealerships ran pre-computers to suddenly having computers. That was a massive shift. Then you think, okay, now you had digital. The web era came in. Well, that led to multiple shifts. And one of the big shifts on that was thinking about how are you utilizing not only websites, but then you think of the iterations that happened from then. social media, you had e-commerce, you had cloud computing. All of these things shifted how the automotive industry operated. And people got very, very good at understanding from a digital standpoint, this is how we can be successful. What are the latest tools? How do we take those tools? How do we incorporate them? We're going to evaluate them based on ROI. The problem, though, when you get into AI is that isn't how AI fundamentally works. AI in itself, it's not the intelligence, but it's capable of doing things in ways that, quite frankly, software systems in the digital just wasn't able to enable. So one of the things that we wanted to do and what we structured is what we call this automotive pyramid to kind of go through, because there's a lot of uneasiness or uncertainty about, okay, how do I understand AI and how do I implement it? And that's okay because when you think about it, let's go back to, for those of us that were around, 1995 was when the internet kind of came about. Think about what our lives were prior to 1995. And if you were to look at 1995 to 2001 when the dot-com bust happened, and a lot happened, but the real strength, everything got figured out after 2001. And you jump from 2001 to 2015 and you think about the dramatic change that happened. Well, right now we're the equivalent of 1996. And people don't really understand. I remember when I got involved in digital in the late 90s, I was doing UI and UX work before we even knew it was called UI and UX work. Simply, you knew that a website had to look a certain way and it had to function a certain way. And we figured out things that became playbooks. That's where we are right now. And when you take a look at the fact that most people got exposed to AI with chat in 2024. So it hasn't been that long. You got 2024, 2025. We're just at the beginning of 2026. How did people start to go through it? And this is what we're seeing within the industry. AI equals chat, basic chatbot interactions, general AI awareness, initial experimentation, for a lot of people, a fair amount of unease, but they started to get a little bit more comfortable with it, a little more confident. So then they got to level two. Now it's about productivity. Okay, now I can accelerate my tasks. I can do it for content generation, personal productivity tools. Okay, awesome. Now I'm at stage two, level two. Then you get to level three. Hey, what are tools for my department? So now you've got tools for service, you've got tools for BDC, you've got tools for marketing, etc. And that's great because AI now understands my department. Up until now, this is almost more like going through software. It's digital systems kind of collectively together. Almost all organizations are are basically stuck below that level. And just for everybody that's just joining, I will be resharing. You missed a bit of a video, but you're kind of at the beginning right now. But I will reshare all of this to get people caught up. And I'll just reiterate, this is not a product demonstration. We really are doing a deep dive on understanding AI technically, fundamentally, culturally, um, basically across the board. And we're going to end with a strong Q&A. But like I was saying here, almost the entire industry is stuck at functional intelligence, which is good. We are not anti, and we are not saying you should be anti-AI tools. What we are saying, though, is the next level and where AI truly functions, because AI is all about data. And we'll get into LLMs and we'll get into agents and how a bunch of things work shortly. But in order for AI to really work, it shouldn't be isolated in tools. We need to be able to connect the data that's coming out of tools and is being generated by tools into the data and start to connect all those tools together to get what we're calling level four, which is a connected dealership intelligence. It's AI now understands the dealership as a system. That means you have cross-departmental data sharing. You have unified customer profiles. You have coordinated decision making. And where this becomes really, really powerful, and we're going to talk about how you do this, and it's utilizing things like data lakes. And so we're not going to go deep into any of this, but we're going to go deep enough so at least people have a sense of this. And we're happy, again, to do any follow-up questions. But once you have cross-departmental data sharing, that's now giving the opportunity to understand the history of consumers. It's understanding when somebody's in service, how is that now impacting F&I? How is this impacting new sales opportunities? What are triggers? What are events that are happening? It's also, too, if there's a dissatisfaction in somebody that we know has bought 7 cars with us and they just had a really bad experience in service, that it's getting pointed out to the right people at the right time in the right way for them to fix it because you don't want to have them defect. You don't want to lose them. So you've got that on that connected dealership intelligence experience. But then you get the next level, and this is where stuff gets really, really interesting. Now you got group. AI understands performance at scale. So now you have multi-location intelligence. That's not only allowing you to do cross dealership optimization and group-wide pattern recognition. Think about now how you can think about a consumer. So, a perfect example, somebody is shopping in your Lexus rooftop, your Genesis rooftop, and your Mercedes rooftop. And as they're going through, each individual rooftop wants that customer. But the group now has more data as to when are they showing up, how many times have they been in one versus the other. They also now know, wait a minute, not picking on Toyota here, but Toyota turned down the finance and these other rooftops accepted it. So now that individual sales manager, that the rooftop can now go back to Toyota and say, look, you better approve them and we got to figure out something or we will lose them. So now you have a level of intelligence that's significantly greater than what you had before. Now, the next level is the OEM dealer network intelligence. So now this is much greater dealer OEM data integrations. It's permitting network-wide coordination. So now you can be informing people of issues, of the upcoming promotions. There's so many things that can all be happening, including early warning signs. Hey, wait a minute. Our network is experiencing EV issues disproportionately, and the AI is catching this. What do we now need to do for service training? What do we need to do for customer interaction so we're being proactive and we don't lose sight of this? Now, 2 things are happening at this stage too. So the OEM, because we know that there's friction at times between OEMs and rooftops, but there are going to be ways that they're going to be able to share data and do things at scale that they never could do before. So it's going to strengthen significantly how they're going to work together. And there are ways that you can remove personal data, et cetera, to remove some of the issues. But what also is happening is at this level, when you have group intelligence, prior to all of this, what used to be the case was the OEM generally had far more data available to them and more understanding than what the group ever did. What's happening now, though, is once you get to group intelligence and you have these integrated data lakes, and I will show you something there, and then Mike's going to do a deep dive. Once you get into a group level of intelligence, they now have a level of data locally that far surpasses what the OEM had. So the power dynamics are going to change dramatically and not in a bad way. Properly set up, and this is why we're talking about architecture. It's really important to understand how if these things are put together as architecture meaningfully and strategically, everybody's going to get more of a win out of this. Now, the last level is the agentic ecosystem, and this is where AI works continuously with the industry. That's years away. But at that point, that means, and this will happen at some point, all of these data sets, they're all going to be incorporated together. Now, I'm going to talk about one of the key things and then pass over to Mike in a second. But one of the things that I think is really, really important to understand here when we talk about intelligence architecture, this isn't artificial intelligence architecture on its own, and that was done very intentionally. Just coordinating the tech will only get you so far. You can't underestimate the power of what's up here. The human side has relevance. I don't care what anybody says. Aspects of all of our jobs will be replaced or augmented through AI. But AI is not capable of replacing our experience. It's not capable of replacing our creativity. It's not capable of truly being able to have that emotional connection. And so when we talk about intelligence architecture, and this is why Bill at the end of this is going to talk about the human side, we're talking about architecting not just how does data need to be set up, not simply how does processes need to be organized, but it's also starting to talk about how do we now go and understand how human beings are working within this architecture, which means that there will be a restructure similar to the same restructure that happened during the industrial age, the information age, the digital age. That restructure does have to happen. And it will happen over the next few years. And part of the reasons why we wanted to have this um, webinar in particular was to let people know beyond chat. And I use chat every day. I do. I love it. But the world of AI is so much bigger than chat. And when you understand what ends up needing to happen in terms of the pros and the cons of each tool and how all of these need to get reconstructed, it's laying a foundation for you to be successful in this next era. That's really what we're hoping to do today. So one of the things that I'm going to do just before I pass over to our good friend and partner, Mike, is I'm going to show you a very quick video here that is on data lakes, because in order to go into understanding some of the aspects of how do you get from stage 3 to stage 4, you really need to understand the notion of data and data lakes. So let me just play this for a quick sec.
Let's talk about a huge shift in automotive AI. It's about moving from just tools to real intelligence. Okay, here's the problem. It's called AI blindness. Your tools are smart, but they're stuck in departmental silos. Each AI sees just a tiny slice of reality. It's intelligent, for sure, but it's blind to the big picture. So get this, the AI isn't wrong. It's just blind. It literally can't see what it was never shown. So how do you fix this? You need to give your AI a complete, unified memory of, well, everything. And that's where a data lake comes in. Don't think database. Think of it as the company's memory. A data lake basically grabs everything, sales numbers, customer chats, you name it, and puts it all in one place. Now, this is a whole different beast from a regular database. It's built for machines to perceive, not just for human reports. But here's the thing, a data lake alone doesn't make you intelligent. It just makes intelligence possible. So how does the AI actually see into the lake and connect all those dots? Well, let's talk retrieval. This is called RAG. The AI searches for meaning, not just keywords, to get the full story before responding. For instance, a simple system finds a record, but an intelligent one, it understands the entire situation.
And get this, it pulls all that together in just 3 to 5 seconds, before anyone even says hello.
So now, humans don't have to be the intelligence layer anymore. The system itself becomes intelligent. Okay, so once you combine memory and sight, AI stops being a tool and starts being a proactive participant. This leads us to the future, agentic AI. And no, these are not chatbots. They're roles that take action. So, what's the difference? Reactive AI just waits for you to ask. Agentic AI is always on, always watching.
These agents can even work together. The customer has one conversation, but multiple AIs are coordinating behind the scenes.
So decisions aren't events anymore. They become systems. Coordination isn't a meeting, it's just the structure. So you have to ask, are you building tools or are you building intelligence? That choice changes everything.
Visit autoagentic.ai to learn more.
So before I pass over to Mike, one of the things that I want to point out is even though we're called Auto Agentic, Agentic AI is something that existed before we did. We just knew what the next phase of AI was going to be. So we were kind of skating to where the puck was going. And in understanding agentic AI, when people talk about wanting systems to kind of work together, there's this barrier to a large extent, especially in the automotive industry, where they're like, I just want this to happen and this to happen and that to happen. And it can happen, but it can't happen when you're not actually architecting the structure for those things to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to Mike for him to talk a little bit about the technology, just to understand how AI works and to help answer a little bit of the reasons for why some people may be experiencing certain things with the AI that they don't understand why that it's happening. So Mike, over to you.
Perfect. Um, so what I want to start with is thinking about AI strategy from a company perspective. So really it's about understanding the problems and not thinking about what can a computer do, or even what you've used AI to do currently will solve X problem for your company. It's just, let's think about the company and the company problems and then bring AI in versus trying to put it into a box based on the use cases that you currently have. So you want to assess, are you currently using tools? Who is using tools both inside and outside of work? A lot of people will use like a GPT, or they'll use like a Gemini just to get through their days, or ask questions around plumbing or recipes. It seems to be prevalent in my house these days. But even that starts to create some base knowledge on use cases that people start to realize, well, how can this be beneficial? Then after you've kind of assessed your current usage inside and outside your enterprise, and you start to look at your business problems, now it's starting to think about, well, what is the architecture to solve these problems? And that's where you get into thinking about things like data lakes. So a data lake, if you guys don't know, is kind of a mixing pot of any type of data. So formidable data, like a data warehouse, is all cleansed, it's all normalized, it's data that's been set up as a binary function, versus data in this case that can take in semantic data. And that's really the huge advantage of data lakes, was being able to put in things like emails and surveys and qualitative data versus quantitative data. But that really wasn't useful for a lot of systems, because a lot of systems couldn't do that unless you had a human going through and adding numeric values or putting in judging systems that would take that qualitative data and actually give you some sort of binary output: successful, good, bad, etc. But with AI, that can be all automated because it can understand semantic information. So that's the huge advantage here. Then it's about data governance and setting up a plan for data residency. So when you think about data governance, this is where the company needs to start really thinking more like an IT firm. And I think everybody, as AIs come in, needs to be more technical at all levels. I don't care if you're in HR or if you're on the floor, everyone needs to kind of evolve their data understanding, because a lot of this is going to get somewhat technical, but it's about the responsibility of that technology. So thinking about data, breaking down every type of data that you have, like down to the exact detail. A client name is PII. You need to know that it's PII. You need to know where it sits and where it comes in and how it's utilized, so you can govern and add policies to that data. And why this is so important is because these AI engines or agents or models, depending on how you integrate, have to interpret that data. They need to understand what access they have. Where can that data go? Who can process that data? Those are all answered by data policies. So breaking down every piece of your data and understanding its uses and understanding its level of security or PII will help you create policies, which will help create rules and systems that you can then use to govern AI and how you integrate AI. So when a vendor comes around and says, hey, I'd like to do this with your sales information, you can start to break down and be like, okay, what information do you need? What data points? What is the classification of that data? Is it sensitive data? Is it PII data? Okay, where are you going to take that data? So that goes into the planning for data residency. There are lots of rules and requirements around where data can sit and where data is processed. So a lot of companies I've worked with in the past, banks, finance, legal, they have very strict guidelines around data residency. So if you're in Canada, you need to host all of that information in Canada. Well, that's also different than where it gets processed, because if I send it to a model like Claude or like OpenAI, well, most of those predominant models exist in the US. So all of a sudden that data is getting processed in the US. Well, then the data transferred, right? Then you have to understand, does that data sit there? Is it stored there? Or is it just processed and come back? And do we have requirements around the processing versus data hosting? Do you have what's called a ZDR? So I'll use lots of terms. We can ask questions what they mean. I'll try to do my best to explain them. But a ZDR is a zero data retention policy or an agreement with a model provider. That means that no data is actually being preserved or hosted on that unless it's considered malicious data. That could be anything from prompt poisoning to other variables, but really understanding that data, how you host it, how you qualify it, where it can go and where it can sit and where it can be processed, is really about mapping out your data and mapping out the policies and rules around it. So some of the things you want to consider when looking at vendors or even looking internally is, again, where does your data sit? What data do you own? And what data is hosted and owned by some of your tools already? I'm sure everybody has a CRM system. Well, You may own the data, but where is the data? Where is it hosted? How do you access that data? Can you clone the data? Can the data exist on your side as well as their side? These are the questions we need to start asking all of our vendors, because having access to that data is really what Barry's talking about. That becomes your corporate intelligence foundation on which you can then make decisions and have activations. So understanding your requirements around data sovereignty, and then understanding what models are available, where they process that data, how those models are hosted, are all really important parts to your data and your kind of AI strategy and how you think about it. Just going to grab a glass of water. I can't talk the way Barry talks. All right. So then it starts to come down to platforms versus point solutions. Like Barry said, you can have lots of tools. That's not a bad thing. We're not saying don't get tools, but you got to ask really good questions when someone says, hey, I have an AI solution. So a lot of people will put a veneer on an AI model and say, hey, it does this thing, but really model's doing 90% of the work. So then you have to sit down and go, okay, what is the thing that you're doing? How much are you going to let me know in terms of your proprietary secret sauce versus transparency? And the more transparent companies are, the better, and the better relationship you're going to have with them. And of course, everyone's going to have their secret sauce, but you really want to understand, where's the data flow? Where is it being processed? What model are you using? Where is that model hosted? These are all things they should be able to be transparent to users about. And then you want to start to think about, well, is this a point solution that I can use for now and then augment? Or is this a point solution that is integral, in which case I need to say, great, you're processing my data, but now you need to give the data back. Every time you process it, I need it back. I need to put it in my data lake. And in the process of putting it in your data lake, you are building on top of that corporate intelligence level. So things you want to consider with point solutions are, what does their roadmap look like? Is this a point solution that is just going to exist for a little while, in which case it goes as part of your strategy, but you're going to replace it? Or does their roadmap align with your roadmap, in which case there's a growth opportunity? Because the less vendors you use, the more you understand your data flow, your data mapping, your data residency, and the better you are in terms of articulating where all of this information is and how it's going, including monitoring, but we'll get into that. The next, you want to understand the cost of implementation for these vendors. Have they done the implementation before? Do they have APIs? Are they secure? Do they have SOC 2 Type 1? Do they have SOC 2 Type 2? Do they have an ISO certification? What are those certifications? And a lot of these companies are relatively new. So they might have SOC 2 Type 1, but not SOC 2 Type 2, sorry, too many, because they haven't done an observation period of a year, or in our case, we did a 3 months just so we could get the certification, but now we're doing a year because we have time, because you can show you have the security processes and protocols in place, and then add on to that. So understanding your vendors, where do they exist? Where do their systems lie? What are their security protocols? All help you choose better vendors. The other thing you want to understand is how agnostic and how interoperable are these vendors. So are they tied to one model? Because you have models like GPT, which are good for some things. It's not bad. It's not my favorite by any means. You have Claude that's great for other things. You have Gemini, you have Mistral. There's literally hundreds, thousands of models out there now. Some are hosted on AWS, some are hosted on Google, some are available as integration opportunities. And all these models may have been fine-tuned for image creation or video editing or analysis or whatever they are. But there's a huge amount of models out there. So you need to understand, what are they using, what models, and how are they using them? That's going to help you understand their flexibility, because it's a race. New models are going to come out every single day across the globe. You need to understand where they're coming from. You need to understand where they were built. Ideally, you want to know what data they were trained on, and then again, where they're being hosted. Now we get into the monitoring and governance side of things. So when you're looking at a long-term strategy, you need to understand, again, all of these tools that you're using and the data lake that everyone's agreed to say, okay, I'm going to use your tool, but you're going to give me back my data. I'm going to put it into my data lake so other tools can access that and do really intelligent things off of this data foundation that we've built. Then the question is, well, how do you monitor it all? Because in the end, decisions are being made by agents. You need to know which agents, which tools are making decisions, what models they're using, so there's traceability. And the second part will be human in the loop. Where's the human who's using these tools accountable, and when they should be accountable? That kind of comes back to the policy thing. Because even though people like to say that AI isn't making decisions, a good example is resumes. AI is not making a decision. As soon as AI reviews a resume, it made a decision. whether you should read that resume, not read that resume, take the time to understand or do an interview. It's made a decision. You might make the final decision, but it's making micro decisions. So understanding your business and understanding what a micro decision is and what an AI is able to do without human in the loop, and where human in the loop is absolutely necessary in terms of its understanding and process. There are lots of platforms out there for monitoring. They'll do everything from monitoring decision-making, thinking processes. They'll monitor quality of output. They can measure against bias. They can measure against, what's the other one that I was thinking of? Anyway, bias is really one of the key ones. A lot of people are concerned about bias, but it can measure against that. It can even do critical loops. So we can take an output by a model or by an application and review it against another formidable flow, and then assess the quality of that using what's called LLM as a judge. So the LLM that you have that's judging other models and other tools can validate the output from these other systems to decide which is better based on the input and the data that's available. So that's kind of the third step from you get from monitoring, you're getting into the LLM as a judge. So a lot of this is about building that data foundation that Barry was talking about in what is called the data lake. You can do what's called a lake house, which is kind of halfway between a data warehouse and a data lake, where you've taken the time, you ingest, let's say, very unstructured data, and you have a model that's doing data cleaning, normalization, it's restructuring the data, and it's putting it in it's vectorizing the data and then building a data house inside the lake where you can get very quantifiable, very quick sets of data. The other consideration is, when do you host the data, where an agent or a model will have full access. And when it has full access, it has full context, which is a lot of what Barry was talking about. The more it knows or the more it can look at, the more it can provide value. If you're using an API connection to your data source, it doesn't know all the data in that system. It's going to go in for a purpose. It will grab the data it needs, and it will make a decision off the data that it grabs. So there's got to be some decision making on when you do an API connection for fast or quick or constant changing data, versus when it's worth having data that is synced up and data you're going to host, where that data you need to have the full context. So a CRM would be an example where you would want full context of that information, versus inventory might be, it so changes so often, so fast. We want to make sure it's an API connection into that, but we may host some of the augmented data within the system. After that, you can get into different data structures. I can go into just a bit of detail on that before I bore everybody with more technical talk. But there's things called clusters. So does anyone here know how models work in the first place? I'm going to take 2 seconds. I know you know, Bill, because I've told you. No, I'll take 2 seconds to explain. So everybody, the amazing part, you can take a model, put it on a USB, take your computer, cut off the internet, and you can ask it how old Albert Einstein is, and it knows. It doesn't have a data set, but the question is, how does it know Albert Einstein's birthday or how old he is when it's not connected to the internet? It has no data. And that becomes the real question of what a model does. So what a model does is it is connected information pieces. So it's a predictive engine. So if I put the word in Albert, it's going to run through a whole bunch of lists of last names, most likely going to be Einstein. If I say Einstein, then it's going to go connect to the next cluster of information outside of that. What are the data points do we know about Albert Einstein? Well, we know how old he is. We know his birthday is. We know some of his major methodologies and processes. We know that he wore socks inside out. Whatever that data could be exists in a cluster now around the 3 pieces of data you just stitched together. So the models are trained on that, then define the connections, because a model is nothing more, and it is a fantastic thing, but it is a predictive system. It's not giving you an answer that it cognitively thought of. It is giving you the most likely information based on the context and the words that you provided it. That's the real important thing. So when you think about that in conjunction with looking at your data set, it is really about that data lake, where the more information you can put in one spot, the more that you can connect the data pieces and derive indexing and augmentation of that data, so that when a model or an MCP comes in to look at that data, it has more context. And the more context it has, the better answers you're going to get. Awesome. So what I really want to talk about is the human part of this, people who determine the success. So I'm going to ask Barry to play the next video for Bill. And then we'll get into his section, and then I'll go through the Q&A. I saw a couple of questions, but my apologies, I wasn't able to answer and talk at the same time.
And I know we're hitting everybody with a lot and it can feel weighty. What I want to say is this, and one of the things is you don't need to know everything, but knowing at least a little bit more and then being able to ask some questions and to ask us questions. We really think that there's so much misinformation out there. It's really important for people to understand, you know, where is chat amazing and why does it not do certain things? Where is Claude amazing? Why does it not do certain things? And you don't need to know the level of details that Michael may know, or I may know, or Bill may know. But if you know enough, we're hoping that that's going to allow you to, forgive my language, but have a little bit of a bullshit detector when somebody's telling you something that, quite frankly, is not even close to being right, A. And B, you're going to be able to strategically understand what needs to happen and why, and bring the right people in at the right time to set yourself up for a longer term success. So that this kind of sets things up for the last piece, which is quite frankly, it's the human barrier to AI. And then I'm going to pass it over to Mike, and then we're going to open it up to full Q&A.
All right, in this explainer, we're diving into a really critical idea about AI. Turns out, the biggest things holding AI back aren't the algorithms or the data, they're us. Let's get into why the real challenge of implementing AI is all about leadership and people.
I mean, this quote really just gets straight to the point, doesn't it? And it's not saying leaders are intentionally messing things up. The crazy part is, the very skills, the instincts that made them successful for years are now actually becoming a problem in this new age of AI. You know, for decades, being a great leader meant finding the best tool, proving its ROI, and managing the project. Simple. But we're not in that world anymore. This new intelligence age, it's not about just one tool. It's about building a whole new capacity for your entire organization to learn and to anticipate. And those old instincts, they're actually becoming a liability. So this leads us to what you could call the executive paradox. With all this money, all this hype being poured into AI, why do so many of these projects just fall flat?
So your first thought is probably, okay, so the tech isn't ready yet, right? Maybe the AI models just aren't good enough, or the tools don't work like they say they do. But here's the kicker. The failure is almost never about the technology itself. The models work, the platforms are incredibly powerful. The real problem is buried much, much deeper inside our companies. The issue is something called the human architecture problem. Think about it. Our companies were designed, built from the ground up, around one single constraint. That real intelligence, memory, and judgment could only come from a human brain. Now we're trying to plug AI into a system that was never, ever designed for it.
And this image just nails it, doesn't it? We're installing these incredibly sophisticated intelligent systems, but we're putting them in the hands of a workforce that hasn't been taught how to work with them. This isn't a tech crisis, it's a training and a literacy crisis.
Okay, so let's see how this actually plays out in the real world. If you look at the high stakes, high pressure culture of the auto industry, these human challenges become crystal clear. In this environment, AI doesn't just meet a little bit of resistance. No, it actively clashes with these really deep cultural norms that have defined how people work, how they compete, and how they build their careers for generations.
Just try to put yourself in their shoes. If you're on a sales team and your paycheck depends on commission, AI can feel a lot less like a helpful sidekick and a lot more like a surveillance system, right? A digital boss just watching your every move, threatening your income.
Then there's the challenge to what we call tribal knowledge. For a lot of people, their value, their very identity at work, is tied up in their years of hard-won experience. So when an AI comes along and suggests a different way, it doesn't just feel like data. It feels like a personal attack on their expertise, on their mentor, on their whole legacy. And on top of all that, this is landing differently with every generation. Boomers are worried about losing visibility. Gen X fears losing their authority. Millennials are scared of becoming less strategic. And Gen Z worries about things becoming too superficial. It's this incredibly complex human landscape out there. But this is the point where a lot of leaders will push back and say, hold on, our AI pilots are working great. The dashboards are all green. And this, right here, is where we find a really dangerous blind spot. And this slide really reveals the trap we're in. We're celebrating success by looking at the wrong scoreboard. We're all focused on the metrics on the left, these outdated digital age metrics like ROI on one tool. Meanwhile, we're completely ignoring the metrics on the right, the ones that actually matter in the intelligence age, like the quality of how humans and AI are actually collaborating.
So what happens is you get this powerful illusion of progress. It feels like you're winning, it feels like you're succeeding, when in reality, you're accidentally building a more fragmented, more inefficient company that's slowly getting buried under the weight of its own intelligence.
Okay, so if that's the mess we're in, how do we get out of it? The answer isn't buying another piece of software. It requires a completely new playbook for leadership. The job of a leader is no longer just about picking the right tech from a catalog. It's about designing the entire foundation, both human and technical, where intelligence can actually grow. The question has to shift from what tools should we buy to what kind of organization do we want to become? And what that means is, one, you have to champion AI literacy for everyone. Two, you've got to design new ways of working where people and AI actually make each other better. Three, you have to use the transparency of AI to build trust, not fear. And maybe most important of all, you have to start seeing your own role not as a manager, but as an architect. And let's just be honest with ourselves. This is emotionally really difficult. It's asking successful leaders, people at the top of their game, to step back into the unknown, to admit what they don't know, and to feel like a rookie again. That's a huge ask. So in the end, it really all boils down to the question on this slide. What's your legacy going to be? Are you going to be remembered as someone who was really efficient at managing tools, or as a pioneer who led their organization into a new age of intelligence? The choice isn't really about technology. It's about what kind of leader you're going to be.
Okay, Bill.
Excellent. Well, before I jump on my material, we're going to do a quiz on all the stuff that Mike talked about. So clusters. Let me know the answers to. Okay, just kidding. But in all seriousness, this is one of those things where we've seen this time and time again, and I don't know if you guys have seen the headlines from MIT. It was a widely distributed where 95% of AI pilots fail. BCG just did a study at the end of the year. 60% of companies generate no material value from AI. Those captured the headlines. I think we all saw those at some point in time, at least skim through it. But if you actually read through it and you look at those articles, they both indicate it's a human problem. It has nothing to do with the technology at all. In fact, actually, I went ahead before this and I showed that McKinsey said that the number one barrier was a skills gap, and workflow design for humans was the key differentiator in company success. Accenture said only 20% of employees feel like co-creators and training wasn't sufficient. Deloitte said that education was a tapology strategy, not or workflow redesign. Bain said 3 to 4 companies say changing behavior is the hardest part. And if that's not enough expertise, the Rand Corp, who counts the Pentagon and like NASA as its clients with multiple Nobel laureates, said that 80% of AI projects fail, which is twice the rate of other non-AI problems, and it's because of miscommunication and misunderstanding, number one cause of the problem. So this isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, I think if we've worked inside of a company, we know what it's like to have a new technology or a new tool sort of foisted on us without any kind of education. And honestly, that's why I left machine learning 15 years ago. I've been doing this stuff basically since it was bleeding edge technology. And I got frustrated because it was a training issue. The technology is literally only as good as the people using it. That's it. That's all the value it has. And I think when we look at situations where if you've used these tools, you understand how critical the writing is to make these tools work. We don't have to go any further in our Facebook feed to see how well these things are going to turn out based on how people are going to interact with these tools. So if we're going to lead into this kind of revolution that we're in right now, like we got to lead like an architect. And just for the people who I could see like how many people have actually seen like a real like bona fide piece of architecture, like gone to a major downtown, you've seen a big skyscraper, you may have seen the Empire State Building or the Willis Tower or Sears Tower, those old farts, the Gherkin in London, which is my favorite buildings. But when you see buildings like that, like they're done very intentionally, and that's really how we have to think about how as leaders we're going to lead this revolution inside our organizations. We need to think like architects. And when an architect designs a building, it's all about the humans. It's how people flow in and out of the building, whether it's a house, whether it's a skyscraper, whether it's a factory. The humans come first. They don't just go buy a hammer and they're like, room, and it just happens. It's not another tool. It's the intentionality of how they design the structure and how people are going to interact with it. And when we implement these types of strategies, whether it be AI or really any technology inside our organization, we need to think about every single detail. We need to think about, just like an architect, where are the bathrooms going to be at? How's the sunlight going to not hit you in the face during a webinar? How is how's the furniture going to be placed throughout the building to increase flow and really to direct your customers and to direct your employees in the right places? And this is all done to enhance the space, not to make it worse. Leading like an architect means that the humans are the number one priority in the situation. And after 2 years of working with Barry and Mike on different implementation strategies at Auto Agentic, our experience is very consistent with the Deloittes and the Accentures and the MITs of the world. And the way these things are typically implemented right now that we can see from our employee or our current clients and in other dealerships we work with in particular is it's really like a five-story building designed for 3 people. Like all the plumbing's on the outside of the building. There are no windows, the doors are locked, and no one knows the code. And we're just like looking at each other going like, what do we do with this, right? That's not architecture. It might be a building and it might be airtight or watertight, but it's not functioning for anybody. But I'm sure it's pretty expensive. So keeping humans out of the loop, just to kind of reinforce Mike's point, it really is the failure point. An architect needs to think through the variables. They need to go through all the minute details. They need to go through all the instructions. They need to understand where the building sits on a property or what materials are considered or how it's going to stand up to bad weather. But they really have to think through all those different variables to understand what the finished product's going to be like and how it's going to last in the future. And as we're navigating this AI revolution, as leaders, we have to make sure that we have all those details. Just providing the tools without the plans, that's not team building. If leadership can't take the time to do the basic things, any new implementation is going to fail, not just AI. So I literally think about, just to stick with the theme, but it's literally when you're told to go back to the drawing board, and I feel like that's where we're at in a lot of these situations is like, we don't do the little details first, and then we're back to the drawing board over and over and over again. So tools don't build by themselves. Your team doesn't need more tools to build better. They need a plan. Those dealerships involved in AI right now just want to keep accumulating more tools, it seems like. Today's dealership employees are stretched thinner than they've ever been. And I just literally before this call was talking to one of my dealerships and they were saying the same thing. They don't have time to learn this new technology. They don't have time to even watch it or monitor it to make sure it's doing its job. So we need to make sure that we're not in that situation, like Barry mentioned before in the video, with the coordination debt. And so this is where we have to think of things in terms of enterprise and not in terms of just one easy patch or one easy fix, or just something that we can do one time inside of chat or Claude or something like that. I like to think of this as a situation where have you ever been to somebody's house and they're like, hey, you want to get me a screwdriver real quick? And you go in their garage and it's just like there's stuff packed to the ceiling and they have, a table saw and a drill and all that, a bunch of stuff there. But really that's what we're doing to our employees when we start to add on more of these AI tools. So I think just to kind of close this out, and I'm gonna actually share a blog post with you guys just because I want to keep this brief and I want to have plenty of time for Q&A. But I want you to consider some questions. After you finish up this presentation, I really want you to think about, who the architect is. If it's not you, who's it going to be? I think every organization needs to have somebody who's going to be a champion to help push this through and actually get the most out of it. But then I also want you guys to ask, like, what should I expect from my vendor? Are they just going to install it and disappear? Are they going to, be around to help? Are they going to play nice with the other vendors? I also want you to consider like how long it's really going to take. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be tomorrow. This technology is evolving all the time. And just this week, Opus or Claude just came out with 4.6, and there's constant evolution and change inside of LLM models that we spend a ton of time and energy and resources to make sure we're continuously evolving alongside of it. So it's something where we have to be patient in terms of our timelines and really understand these are our mile markers and where we're going to be and be comfortable with that. And then the last thing I want you guys to consider is, are you really prepared to commit to success? And I think as we go through this is a revolution like I don't think we've ever really experienced in our lifetimes. I might look old, but I grew up with cars. I grew up with jets. I grew up with spacecraft, like all that stuff took time. But there again, it's one of those things where I did grow up during the internet revolution. And Barry and I talk about a lot, and we were both involved. Mike was too, right from the very get-go when browsers came out. I remember when that happened. I remember, when Google was brand new. I remember all those things, and we tend to forget that it took time for all those things to evolve. We didn't, just get a smartphone on day one. That was invented in 1983. It took till 2007 before we got to something like this. And so we need to have that same level of patience and realize, as like with any type of general purpose technology, it takes time to evolve, and we need to commit to having that timeline and having that patience. And that's why thinking like an architect is so important. We have the design, we have the plan, we have the expectations. It might take a little time to get done, but it's going to be done in the way we want to have it be done.
And so, just kind of, you can probably notice we're just scratching the surface. But the reason that we wanted to have this webinar, and we're going to have lots more, is we were feeling that there wasn't enough conversation and direction and illumination on the fact that AI can't be approached the way that the technologies were in the digital age. And at the end of the day, you don't need to do a deep, deep dive technically, but you do need to understand enough so that you can strategically make better decisions for the organization overall. And so, I'm sure you guys are going to have more questions than what we've answered, but we do hope that we were demonstrating that there is a path that you should consider that can, if you go down that road, lead to an organization that isn't just more efficient, but Mike will talk often about AI is not about efficiency. It is, but it's about scale. And the companies and the dealerships and groups and OEMs who start to go down this pathway over the next 2 years, they're writing the playbooks that the industry will be following 5 years from now. But the difference for those companies that start thinking this way, they're going to be exponentially further ahead than somebody who starts that journey later. And the reason is once you have data lakes established, once you have these processes established, the learning and the optimization is a multiplier that's not linear, it's exponential. And so as soon as that other group or dealership or OEM tries that later, they're not going to catch up. It's not like when two people bought SaaS and one started using a system and they benefited from it, another one started using it, and then 6 months later they caught up. It's not like that at all. The learning side is what is making this such a prioritization. So I'm going to stop there. I want to open it up to answer any questions, and do a deeper dive here in any areas that you guys want us to. Anything that you would like us to expand further? Or I know there's an earlier conversation about a CDP, a data lake. There's some things. Oh, sorry, I see. Go ahead. Did we just stun you?
Who? I didn't see who raise their hand. So, Rose?
Oh, I was just going to mention that you mentioned earlier sort of adoption getting in and the hesitancy of human nature. I think that is a huge block here that has to be identified, Barry and team, because
Yeah.
I see it every single day when I'm dealing with people are very hesitant to show show ignorance as a path to learning, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm too busy to learn how to be less busy. We hear that all the time. And I think one of the things that's important in what you were saying, to go back into some of the data, Canadians, when there was a poll that went out to ask, what do you think of AI in society? And 40% thought AI was going to be positive, 39% of Americans, 81% for Chinese. So here's where this gets very interesting, because you have how are LLMs being trained? And it's all based on data. So the more data that they get, the more that these LLMs are going to be able to do, to understand, to connect, etc. There's a very interesting book by Kai-Fu Lee called AI Superpowers. If you get a chance, read it. It's brilliant. He was a guy who was the lead architect for what ended up becoming all of Alexa, did all of the sound. He then went back to China, created the equivalent of Silicon Valley in China, heavily involved. So he understands the Silicon Valley perspective for building AI, and then also the Chinese, and it's different approaches. And he says there's 4 things that you need to be successful in AI. And I'm going to circle back to what you were saying, Rose. You need government support. You need academic support, research. You need entrepreneurs, because academics are woefully not very good at commercializing. So you need entrepreneurs. But then you need customers to use the AI, because the customers are adding to the data. They're making it more optimal. They're making it more efficient. The entrepreneurs make more money. That's generating more taxes. It's rewarding the government for their early investments, and it's encouraging more research. Well, here are 2 reasons why this is not only a geopolitical, but I'll go back to why it's so important to understand architecting your ecosystem as a group or as a dealership or as an OEM. And it's, you have 81% of Chinese willing to use AI. So they're generating more data, which is allowing them to optimize their LLMs, and it's allowing them to get further ahead in this AI race. And you can't just get caught up. So now, from a Canadian standpoint or an American standpoint, from a collective North American standpoint, the less we engage in it, we fall behind geopolitically. So now take that same notion and apply that to groups. One group starts in 2026, one starts in 2029. The same thing happens. The groups that understand how to architect and how to understand are going to be further ahead. So now it goes back to people again. You've got to train them. There needs to be literacy. People need to know why. And we hear this all the time. Listen, can't chat just do that? There's a bunch of reasons why chat can't do it. One of it, there's token limitations. There are all sorts of, Mike, you explain why, because this is one of the biggest areas. You finally get people to do AI, and then they just get stuck on chat. Mike, do you want to maybe expand on that?
Yeah, I think the challenge is people get stuck on a single modality. They get used to a simple interactive. They see some initial benefits, and then they get stuck in that loop of small benefits, without thinking again about the broader opportunity or the broader structure of what's possible. The other thing is they don't understand how that chat works. So you've seen tons of government officials, you've seen judges and lawyers all use chat improperly. They've uploaded files they should not be uploading, sensitive trade secrets, PII, sending it to a model that has, and a company that has no requirements to not delete your data. Specifically, that's one of the main reasons we don't use GPT very much. And the one we do use is self-hosted, so we can manage data in and data out, so we can retain the data in the zero data policy. But they'll just send information in and then use that information verbatim. The other challenge is chat is very persuasive. So it sounds confident. It also lies a lot, but it's always going to sound confident. And then when you correct it, it's going to assume you're right, which is not a great position. You need a model that challenges you. You need an agent that says, you're not an expert. Here's an example. I use agents all the time for legal contract reviews. Do I have a lawyer? Absolutely. We have a legal team, but it doesn't prevent me from using AI to review the legal documents, understand the clauses, understand the risk, and then provide a point of view on what's acceptable from a business perspective or not. Then I can give that to my lawyer, and the lawyer now can do additional work and even use AI to redline, understanding the intention. But I have to challenge it, because all of a sudden I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And the legal agent originally, this is years ago, would be like, yeah, that sounds great. You're like, well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the supervisor here. You're the supervisor. You're the intelligence. So you set it up to be a challenger, and you use its insights over top of yours, which is different than I could use an agent which is more task oriented, focused on doing things I already know really well. So I'm just here to judge the output. Is it a good quality? Can I use that information, fact check it, and send it out? But I think what Barry's saying is people get stuck in a small piece of what AI can do from a generative perspective. They undermine the opportunity. and then they think they've solved the problem.
And
Anything I
and we,
missed?
yeah, we see it constantly. And it's a little bit ironic because what ends up happening is the people that tend to just be, oh, I'm just going to use chat are the same people that 12 months ago were like, I'm not going to use chat because chat sucks. And, a year from now, then they'll go back, and that's okay. Like, here's what we've also learned. That's part of the learning, and it's kind of why we want to start doing, we're going to be doing a lot more, not only content, but webinars like this, because we think a rising tide raises all boats. And even when it comes down to, I'm not going to call anybody out, but I've got a lot of amazing, very close friends in the industry who say things about AI that I'm like, oh, dude, that was wrong. Like, what are you saying that for? They don't know. It's because you get to a certain point and you don't know what you don't know. In the same way, I don't know what I don't know. So why I'm not as directive is because we keep learning. There's so much out there that we don't know. But when you bring it down to a strategic and a business framework, and you bring it down to a human framework, it's a little easier to then work to sit down and say, okay, are we really creating a structure that's utilizing AI in a way that is demonstrably going to give us the scale and the intelligence and the framework that we need? And that's the position that we're constantly trying to do. And a little bit on that note, and then I'm going to just pass it over to Bill. And then Chrissy, we'll jump into you. One of the things of note is for anybody that's interested, I'm going to be actually heading up for Schulich School of Business and AI Mastery certificate program. So haven't announced this yet. If anybody's interested, it's going to be a 2-day boot camp because we're really, really wanting to see this succeed. Bill, I think you wanted to say something, and then Chrissy, we'll jump to you.
Yeah, and I think I kind of got brought up a couple times, but I want to say, Rose, I just want to make sure your question. I don't know if it got fully answered there. So, but I think you got to give people room to fail. I think that's the bottom line. I think this is where, as a person that's been pretty much training full time for back half of my life here, there's got to be a space where people can just experiment, have fun, talk about it, report back. And what I encourage everybody to do is again, it's one of those like next things after this call is think about, again, who's that architect going to be if it's not going to be you? But part of that is like really identifying those people inside your organization who are going to be your early adopters, your first users. So those are the people that you see in the lunchroom. They're chatting it up or somebody, or the glue players like to call them. But then there's always the resident IT nerd who has to fix the Word docs, and I mean every organization's got it. I mean it doesn't matter what vertical it's in, but really start to identify who those people are going to be, and then give them space to play a little bit, but then also have a fireside chat about what you're learning. What I find is that you need to build a critical mass, and again, I go back to that web thing. We all went through the, at some point in time in our life, we went from the first website we ever looked at till now.
Yeah.
And it started that same way. Hey, have you tried this search engine? No. Have you seen this website? You heard about this place called Amazon? They got like everything. No way. But it's easy to link back to that because we all went through that, and we're in that same like primordial phase right now. We want today, we want to apply what we feel like today to this, but we're not there yet. We could be a decade away from that. So while adoption's fast, people aren't evolving fast enough for it. And so I think that's where you got to think about who's your A team that's going to be spearheading this change, and then giving them space to develop that so that way they can disperse it inside your organization.
Yeah, Chrissy.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm interested in getting your take on is I can picture giving some of this rope to folks and really, allowing these more sticky folks that are interested in playing and delving in, and even having them come back to us and say, oh, this is what I found. Like I can picture all of that going very well, but I think that there might be some limitations, and I'd like to kind of hear from you guys what you are seeing as far as what the larger obstacles are. And one of the things that's popping in my mind is like our DMS is an example. So like, where is the data living? Where is the person living on a day-to-day basis? And if they're potentially flipping from one place to another place to another place, does that also create additional obstacles that might just be too hard to overcome? And if that is the case, then what collectively, or what potentially are you seeing as a way to, get maybe the DMSs up to speed on this? Because like I almost feel like we're the tailwind of what they do for us because of those obstacles. What are your thoughts there?
I actually had a 3-hour conversation this morning with the group on exactly this. This was a big part. This was about an hour of the 3 hours was this. They used a great analogy and they called it, if we're going to talk about a data lake, there are key accessories or whatever that's called, rivers that are dammed. And what do we do? And quite frankly, we all know the names that came up. And those were the names that came up. And so the concept was first and foremost, and I love the analogy that they were using. It was interesting because it was them more than me actually mentally walking through it. They're saying, okay, we know that there's dams here, but we could have a static lake. It doesn't need to be living where everything's coming in. We can extract and then we can set that up. And that literally, they said that'll probably solve 80% of what we wanted to solve with it anyway. You're going to have, and there's 3 ways that we like to look at it. And actually, I did put a piece of content together on this. One was think about your vendors and your data sources like staff and employees. You've got staff that are really, really good on their own, but you know that they're horrible to everybody else around them. You've got staff that are really open and they play well with others, and there's staff that are open, they just need to learn how to play. And so what that means is you're going to have tools and you're going to have systems that have APIs or MCPs, which is basically just an API for AI. You're also going to have vendors that they may not have that, but they're open to it. Hey, yeah, we're totally open to it. We see where things are going. How can we help? Then you're going to have the dams. Okay, so there's a few things here. And Mike, I'm probably going to ask you to maybe talk about some of how to get into that. But the starting point is we can extract a lot of data to still get things going, because it will be a matter of time before those dams get busted. The question is, are we breaking them down or are they taking them down? But Mike, can you maybe go a little bit into how can we get access to some of these, even if they're being difficult?
Yeah, I think Mary nailed the first one, which is the export of data. So the question is, how timely do you need the data to be, right? So if you say, hey, we have this export, all the information we need, great, bring it in. Normalize it, structure it, put it into an AI data lake or an AI-enabled data lake. Then the question is, how often do you go and sync up? And it could be a manual sync, fine. But to your point, if you can solve 80% of your problems with week-old data, then you can probably solve 90% of your problems with daily data dumps. And you can even automate some of those processes. The next question is the read-write capability, right? So how do you write to these databases? And that's where computer use is going to become a valuable tool for a bit. If you can't API, or to Barry's point, it's a dam. You just can't get around it. So then what you do is say, okay, we're going to give a license to an agent that has a computer that can then go in and actually input data based on requests or protocols or processes or whatever you've evaluated on your system. So that's still in development in a lot of cases with a lot of different companies, but there are companies that have seen significant movement and capability there. So that's where I find it interesting about these companies that are all dammed up. And it's not just one industry, it's many industries and many different products and everything like that. Is AI is going to win this one way or the other. Like AI with a computer or human with a data dump. Because once you have the data dump, then the question is, okay, well, what else do we need? Well, we can write to the new data. We can pull from the data. Okay, so where else do we need to access the data? Well, if email is integrated into your data lake, well, then email can go directly into the data as it comes in. So you start, that's where it comes down to that fundamental thinking about your data as a priority, and then adding policies and processes and all the boring stuff that I do on a daily basis to that to integrate it. But it's just data sources, right? And whether it's a CRM that's a data source, or whether you say, okay, well, the CRM has data sources, that's text messages and emails. Okay, well, who owns those? Well, we do. Okay, well, then how do we augment that then? Like you can find different ways to penetrate a dam. The question is just how much effort is it and how long will it take?
Yeah,
Well,
and to say there's one last part of that too, is just sort of like, what can you be satisfied with now? You know, I mean, just thinking like an architect again. you have resources. Well, if we all want to have a mile high building, right? But like we don't have elevators that go that high. But if we have elevators, half that high, what I mean? Like really going down that pathway of understanding, like just like Mike was saying, like can we do 80%? If we could get one spreadsheet exported and into an agent, can that do the work we need to do? I think that's the important part is just, thinking about things in incremental improvements. I think that'll help everybody in this process, understanding, okay, what can we do now? What can we do tomorrow? What can we do a week from now? That's that intentionality of understanding that it's going to take a little time to make sure all these things connect together and how
Well,
these systems grow.
yeah, and kind of connecting a lot of this together with the human side, the business needs side, the training side, et cetera, is the reality is you can't jump to like what we've called stage 7, which is the whole industry. That's years and years away. And likewise, you can't just jump to we've got everything worked out within a dealership, let alone a dealer group. So what we're finding is you need to find who are the people that are open to learning and they're open to unlearning and working together to figure out what's that right data strategy supposed to be. And then choosing what are elements of key. Do we want to sit down and access data that's going to help us for training? Do we want to access data that's going to help us understand financial anomalies or focus on F&I? Do we want to stand whatever it is? But as you accomplish each individual thing and teams start to get better at it, they're now teaching other people within the organization. But what it's also doing is you're constructing through all these little lake houses. I love that you're ultimately going to have all these lake houses, but you're building a lake that just keeps filling in and getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And at the end of the day, and we had this conversation this morning, literally, which will be, will DMSs even be around down there? Because if you have all of this data and this organizational memory, and this is the other advantage. I did talk about Chrome data when I had one of my SaaS companies. I was spending tens of thousands of dollars on Chrome data. All Chrome data was somebody that finally sat down and said, "Hey, let's just document every single vehicle and all of the features." It was data input, and then they could sell it. Well, this is what we're talking about in a data lake. Once you've extracted it all, we can now build all of the information that we need, and you can start to now create systems over the next few years where you can bypass entirely and recreate for the organization specifically processes and interactions that are benefiting employees, benefiting customers, benefiting all of your vendors and suppliers and everybody around in the ecosystem. And again, that's why it's really about having these kinds of conversations to be able to sit down and say, look, let's think beyond what's the current flashy gadget. How do we actually think about where is this industry going and how is AI going to restructure it fundamentally?
A great question from Mike Davis in the chat.
Yeah. Do you mind
Mike
if I
said he
jump in
loves
there?
the question, so we'll let him go for it.
I love the question because it's a legit, like every person question, and it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite ones to answer. The way I'm going to answer this is in the most ironic way, though, is your answer is AI. Here's a really good example. You can talk to, and Mike, you can type it in. What AI do you use every day? Like, or not every day. What AI have you used currently? If you use something like a GPT or a Claude, definitely use more Gemini Claude. They're just better, more secure, and better with your data. But you can ask it to create a quick training plan on how to learn AI, 5-minute updates every day on what to learn about AI. Do not use the internet. Confidently, I'm saying this. Do not use the internet to learn about AI because the internet has a confusing amount of terms. The internet contradicts each other and has created a ton of noise out there. Let AI teach you about AI because it will have a more synthesized version of it. It will talk to you in consistent nomenclature, or you can ask it, hey, I hear this term. They're going to say, yep, that term really just means the same thing as this term, right? And you go, okay, cool. Because now we're all talking about something like RAG, right? Which is, oh my God, why can I never remember how much it stands
Retrieval
for?
augmented generation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
that, right, which is really, I mean, when you break it down to a simple form, it's a text file
Yeah.
that AI goes and gets, right? It's a vectorized text file. If it's an image, it's image description, unless you're using a modal that can literally look at the image and understand it. But you're going to see all these terms. And once you break them down to the simplest things, everyone's just talking about the same stuff. Like
Well,
you're
and the
getting people
fact
talk
that
about,
Mike couldn't remember what reg is goes to show you why you just need to know conceptually. You don't need to know what it
yeah,
is. Anyway,
yeah.
back to you, Mike.
No. I often like I talk to a lot of people about just trying to get caught up in with AI, and I say, look, just focus on a few key areas, and you'll start to understand way more than most people. Which is, okay, what is an agent? Right? Go do a deep dive. An agent is nothing but a prompt. A prompt is nothing but text. That text is context that gets put into a model that gives it better understanding of the message you're about to put into that model. Amazing. So now you understand that agents are nothing but words. Different quality, different levels, because you can see an agent that's 500 words, or you can see an agent that's 50,000 words, right? Very different. And then you're like, okay, well, we have agents. They have memory. Well, memory is just RAG. It's just a different term for RAG. It's just, again, text files. And they could be summaries or raw text files, but it's all text. Like most of AI, you're just going to break it down into copy, because that's all it really is. And that copy is context. And as we were breaking down what models do is the more words I put in, the more mapping that it does on the model side to understand the context of what you need, and therefore makes the predictive capabilities better answers, better outputs. So a lot of it's just use AI to build out a training system, break down really complicated questions, send it an article. Hey, I read this. How does this pertain to what you're teaching me? And then have it break down the article, and it will break it down in the same solutions, strategies, and categories that it's trying to teach you in. You're going to go from 0 to 7 or 8, which is amazing. And then, hopefully you don't have to get to a 9 or a 10, because then that just gets really messy. And then you and I can have one-on-ones, because I think I know a bit of this when it gets to that level.
So
I have
Well,
developers and
the short
engineers
answer
for
is
that.
usage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the thing is that Mike's saying, like, the more you use it, the more you know. And I think this is one of those things where if you went to NADA, for instance, or go to any conference and you talk to the vendors that are there, you can tell the ones who are actually using it versus ones who are not actually using it. And I think that is a really easy way to really understand is if they can have that explanation. But Mike, as always, is great with that type of stuff. But I think part of that is you're getting practice at the exact same time that you're getting yourself answered. Barry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and Chrissy, one of the things that I was there are a bunch of resources, and I'll follow up with everybody. One of the ones, so if you go to, and I put it in the chat, but if you go to the Auto Agentic website, I did write a book where we explore all of these. It's not us pushing Auto Agentic at all. It's literally going through how to think about it. And a group reached out to ask me if there was an audio version, so I also launched an audio version that you can also put and find that in there too. So please listen or read that and let me know what you think. Equivalently, Kai-Fu Lee has some incredible books out there that I highly recommend. His AI Superpowers is one of the best, and it's an easy read, but you'll really understand things. It is absolutely fantastic. I go back to what Bill said, play with tools. And so I had this come up. I was presenting at an incubator earlier this week, and they were asking me what AI system should we try? And here's my answer. What are the things that you're personally interested in? Go less on the professional level, go on the personal level first. So, are you creative? Then explore things like Runway, which does video and static images. You can do marketing. If you like music, use something like Suno, and you can create songs, you can create jingles. If you really are interested in much more where it's like research, start playing around with things as simple as Perplexity and then jump in and play with Claude. If you're really into some things like vibe coding, which a lot of people be like, what's vibe coding? Play with things like Lovable and Replete or Cursor, because what you're going to end up being able to do is you can build your own website. Sit down, bring your kids there, build a site. I literally took my wife and sat down with her and I showed her how we were going to build her a website. And when my daughter's back from university, I'm going to build one with her using vibe coding because you'll start to get the sense. Mike, I think you look like you've got some suggestions
Oh
too.
no, just adding to it. Like it really seems daunting. Someone says vibe coding. Again, it's a term, but literally you're prompting a thing that's going to build the website. It's doing the hard part. It's setting up all the services. It's setting up the code and the libraries for the code and accessing different pieces of it. And within minutes, you've got something to look at and something to talk to and something to prompt. And that's the same with images and videos. Playing with it every day. Like a good example, I didn't know what wine to buy. I know I like a specific type of wine. I took a picture of a wall of wine at the LCBO and said, what should I buy? And because it has a model that can take in images and read text way faster than I can and rate them and has database and reviews and it correlate all that data, within 5 minutes, I was like, it told me which wine to buy. And then I was like, I can't find it. So it's on the bottom shelf to the right. I was like, thank you. Because again, it could see the picture. So just think, like, just I use it now. I haven't Googled anything in forever. But the more you use it every day to, I don't know, make a recipe. We used it to make sloppy joes. Again, just use it every day. And then as you start to do it, you start to set an expectation of what digital can do.
There's one thing I want to also throw in because there's a lot of conversation and it's not bad. I'm not knocking. This is the thing. It's nothing's binary in this. So there's a lot of conversations about prompting. You got to prompt. You got to learn how to prompt. Well, yeah, prompting will give you better answers, and there's a lot of valid reasons why you want to understand how to prompt and how it works. But for anybody that's familiar with design thinking, which came out of Stanford, which you're just asking challenging questions, you're just talking. It's like, what's another way to think of this? Or how would somebody in another industry approach this problem? Though that kind of conversation, you're actually going to get more out of AI. So even when you're using something like vibe coding, I want to have a page that talks about my history. Here's my LinkedIn. Okay, now it's gone through. Okay, based on what you're seeing with my LinkedIn, how should I position myself? Oh, well, I'll create some copy. What do you think about this? Oh, I really like the headline that you just set up, but I don't feel it's personal enough. I'd like it to be something like this and this and this, and in orange. Okay, boom, and then it does it. Oh, that's great. Okay, now I want to set up another page. That's all vibe programming is. You're just talking with it and saying, here's what I'd like. So when you think about using I often tell people just think about every system that you're using the way that you would really, really bright interns, exceptionally gifted, whether they're gifted creatively or gifted otherwise. You may not know, but you're going to sit around a boardroom table. You're not going to be huge prompts. You're going to say, okay, here's what I'd like you to do. And I understand that you're really good at this. Can you do this for me? And then just let them go. And you're going to be, oh my God, I can't believe what they just come up with. Okay, I love this part, change this part. That's it. Just start like that. It removes a lot of the issues and you're going to get really comfortable. And you're going to be like, oh, if I can do this in my personal life, what can it now do in my professional life? And that's now where it's all going to start to come together. And your learning curve is going to be astronomical. I guarantee it, you're going to get so comfortable so much more quickly, which is the other reason why we keep circling back and saying the world in 2 years is going to change. And it's the people this year that get started who are going to benefit the most out of it.
I really love the term where it's AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who uses it will. And that comes back to the scale perspective. Unless you are the ones adapting, learning, tooling, collaborating, failing every day with AI, then someone else is going to come in and say, I can do that with AI. And you need to be able to say, well, I can do this with AI. Like now it's becoming a part of resumes. How to use AI in your design process, your thinking process, your development process. It's part of resume requirements to understand not just how you're using AI, but why you use that model. Because people want to know that you are using these tools to augment your capabilities and scale your intelligence. Anyway, I know we're getting at the end, so.
Any other last questions? And also and you can send something to me directly too, but was this useful? We want to keep doing more of these, but okay.
So I think
Awesome.
it's a background motivator for like, get off your ass, let's go do this. You know what I mean? It's one of those. Like it.
Amazing. If anyone worries, the score is currently 1-1 for Canada and US.
All right. Well, I don't know.
Awesome.
It's like the Blue Jays, and it seems like every time, even the Raptors, I feel like every meaningful Canadian game always comes down to the very last second. So, but we appreciate everybody's time. And please check out the book. We do actually have an area just called resources that we're constantly putting up content. So that's another place to check. But reach out to us directly. We're happy to answer questions. Like stuff that's completely unrelated to Auto Agentic is absolutely fine. We really do think education's critical. So just if we can help, we'll take that call.